Initiating moisture.
Welcome to Moist Meter. How wet are ya? If you'll check your menus, you'll see that the only item on today's menu is the Surge. The ingredients consist of mainly Dark Souls with a hint of incompetence. However, the overall product is a pretty enjoyable dish, most comparable to a shrimp Alfredo, because the Alfredo is great, however the shrimp kind of brings it down a little bit. I'm a fan of shrimp, but shrimp to me just doesn't go very well in an Alfredo pasta dish, and that's kind of how I feel about this game without giving too much away right off the bat. Now this game was made by Deck13, they're the people behind Lords of the Fallen a few years ago, which was their first attempt at a Dark Souls-like game. This is now their second attempt, their sophomore attempt, their second testicle in the nutsack, and it seems they've corrected a lot of the mistakes they made with Lords of the Fallen. However, one glaring issue I take with the game is there's no character creation option. That's not a big thing, it's just I'm a big fan of Dark Souls and I really love the character creation options, as do a lot of people. It's great to just make some fucking abomination straight out of a Lovecraftian horror scene. You just play as a boring, generic man von bro. There's really no excuse for not just having some type of character creation tools, and it really adds a lot to the experience. Now the first pubic hair I'm gonna pluck off this chicken is the story. The story's not bad, there's nothing too special about it, it's pretty decently written, there's really no huge issues I take with it, it's not memorable, it's nothing that really stood out to me, it was there, it moved it along, it was nice. Voice acting was nothing too special either, but it wasn't bad, it was just, everything regarding story was just pretty mediocre. Finding the audio logs was pretty cool though, a lot of the audio logs were actually pretty interesting to me. But that was about it. Much like Dark Souls, you have to go out of your way for the interesting pieces of exposition, but the story is not bad on the surface, and the cutscenes look fucking great. The cutscenes were really, really pretty, as was pretty much everything in this game. Now, I was not a big fan of the enemies. The enemy design was pretty boring. Almost all the enemies were exactly the same. The bosses weren't too cool either, nothing crazy or off the walls, nothing like a dildo bot that you fought. It was just very bland enemies, as was the armor. The armor was incredibly stale and underwhelming. A lot of it just looked similar to the last piece of armor you got. Nothing really stood out. It was just kind of boring armor. Weapons, on the other hand, were fucking badass. A lot of the weapons were really cool in my opinion. However, it's just the armor fell short. It looked like Matt Damon's Elysium, except with a little more milk in the titty tanks. It just kind of looked like real steel with Hugh Jackman meeting Dark Souls. And that's not a bad thing. I really like the setting. I'm a big fan of the setting, and I thought a lot of the environments looked nice. Level design wasn't quite that good, not quite to the level of Dark Souls, but not bad. But what really shines with this game is the gameplay. It was really fresh and really unique. You could target specific parts of the enemy you're facing. You could go for the armored parts, which they take a lot less damage, but gives you the opportunity to cut the limb off with an execution move and take that part of their armor, get the schematic for it. Or you could go for an unarmored piece of the enemy and kill them a lot quicker, but without the chances of getting their schematics. I thought it was a great trade-off and a really interesting system that made you think and changed the way you play and approach different enemies. I fucking loved that. I thought that was really cool. Also, the crafting system was pretty nice, and as well as the implants that they had, I thought really just livened up the experience. It wasn't just a Dark Souls clone, it took the Dark Souls formula and built on it and added new things to it that I think really worked really well. It just never really got old. It was always fun, even just to fight the low henchmen, the grunts, you know, you target their left leg and you cut that shit off, and then all of a sudden you got a schematic for a brand new diamond butt plug. It was just fun. However, the game really did just leave a lot to be desired. There was a lot of potential wasted here. There's only 5 bosses in the entire game. Dark Souls had so many bosses, Neo had so many bosses, and that made it fun. The bosses were always a really fun and challenging but rewarding experience. In this game, there's only 5, which is just such a fucking letdown. And the henchmen never really make up for the lack of bosses. It'd be like having a tech deck finger skateboarder replace a real skateboarder at the X Games. Alright, so now we've got the chefs in the kitchen calculating the moisture content of this game, and we've clocked it at a 75%. The story is pretty cliche, the characters aren't very interesting, the setting is hit or miss, some people will like it, some people won't, but I think most people will agree that a lot of it looks pretty. A lot of the environments do get very samey and repetitive, just like the enemies, However, the gameplay makes up for most of its shortcomings. The implant system where you jack in a fucking floppy disk into your head to give you little bonuses, that's pretty fun, as well as the actual combat, which is just fucking superb. I don't think it's quite as crisp or as rewarding as Neo or the actual Souls series, but for fans of the Soulsborne type of games, I think that's what they're calling them, Soulsborne, fucking Seamanborn, I don't know what it's called these days, you're going to want to pick this game up because it does the formula really well as add some new things to it, leading to an overall fun experience. So yeah, that's it. Live moist or dry hard.